And I'm just gonna get us started as different people stream in. I'm Joshua. I'm here as Impart, and I'm here as a moderator for this panel, joined by the lovely Jessica and Mai. We will get the introductions proper in a few seconds. I hope you don't mind that the the virtual background is blending into me every now and then. But as I was telling the other panelists earlier, it's okay to be blue sometimes. So that's just what we are dealing with. I'm just gonna walk us through a super brief sort of check-in interactive activity. We very much intend for this panel to be a place about real stories, but also a place for real engagement, real interaction, to hear from you as well. So by way of checking in with everyone, and by way of introduction, um, check-in mood board. I'm not sure if any of you have done this before. As you can see from this picture, there are three figures in the picture. The man on the left, who is inquisitive, trying to figure out what's happening. That's myself. This is at one of Impart's community events. The little boy in purple, I would describe his emotions as just being happy to be here, not really thinking too much, not really uh, yeah, not really flustered and too concerned with the things around him, just happy to be here. And the third, you have the cat. Right, you have the cat. The cat's not really happy that he's being annoyed. Maybe it's been a long week for the cat, a little grumpy of sorts. And this is also my way of figuring out how's everyone feeling. So if you all don't mind, I'm gonna get us to type out which figure we resonate the most with in the chat box, okay? So for if you feel most inquisitive, then type man. If you feel just happy to be here, type boy. And if you feel like it's been a pretty long week, maybe a little bit more grumpy, that's fine. And you can type cat. I'm gonna get us to do. Oh, people are already doing it. So I've actually done this before, and I have a sinking suspicion that people just enjoy typing cat. Not to invalidate anyone's feelings as well lah. I see a fair amount of cat. Honestly, frankly speaking, that's very much how I'm feeling here as well. It has been a long week, and it has been a day of back-to-back Zoom meetings. But as much as I feel cattish, I also feel quite boyish in that I'm honestly just happy to be here, happy to share the space with all of you, and happy most of all to hear from Jessica and Mai. I'm Joshua once again. I'm the moderator, the person who will be leading this panel as well, and I work with Impart. I'll say a little bit more about that well as this goes on, but I'm just gonna hand this off. Mai, how are you feeling? And introduce yourself to us.
Sure, thanks, Josh. I picked boy. I'm happy to be here. One, it's a Friday, always a good reason to be happy. And two, I'm meeting new friends to this event and getting to talk about empathy. So it's so much win, right? So happy to be here, as I said. As way of intro, okay, my name is Mai. I take care of community for Our Better World. And Our Better World is the digital storytelling initiative of the Singapore International Foundation, or the SIF. And SIF, our work is to gather world communities together to do good. And how do we do that, right? At Our Better World. So we do that through stories, right? So if you ask me, so what does OBW do? We basically tell stories to inspire action. And so that journey, right, telling the story and the end goal of inspiring that action, there's a middle road. You pass through something before you get to that action. And what we try to do through stories is we endeavor, right, to evoke an emotion. And that emotion between telling the story and inspiring people like you to take action is empathy. Because the reason we tell stories is because we want to dispel apathy in the world, and we want to encourage empathy. Because we do believe that empathy for yourself and for others is the way to make change, positive change, and impact happen. So you can imagine, because empathy is so much part of my work and our team's work. I'm thrilled and I'm happy and I'm actually humbled and honored to be here. So, yeah, over to you, Jessica.
Okay, yes. Hi, I'm Jessica. I serve as the secretary in SP Singapore Poly Peer Support. So for me, what I do is I do administrative work and play a part in like create like typing and sharing events that are peer support based, and also hope to contribute to like cultivate an empathetic and empowered community in SP. Yes. So yeah, we are a bunch of uh young and fresh kids, you know, trying to view the world out there uh with uh understand it, to try to understand people better. Yeah. Still
And how are you
learning.
feeling today, Jessica?
Oh yes, feeling. I'm feeling all three. So like inquisitive because I get to talk to all of you, and then the boy cause just being here and low-key happy, and the cat cause yeah, it has also been a hectic week for me. Just finished like MSTs, although for a lot of people our MSTs have been deferred, so it really depends. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing screen so that we don't have to stare at that weird thing. But thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Mai. And once again, I'm Joshua. I'm here moderating the session. And I am working for a non-profit organization called Impart. And in short, Impart is just really about figuring out community solutions for community needs. We work very closely with youth facing adversity. That means youths anywhere from former juvenile delinquents, the youths facing mental adversities with IMH, the youths under child protection, basically youths with complex challenges. We meet them in the community, we figure things out together, and we see where that takes us. So, once again, happy to have all of you here. We very much intend for this to be interactive as well. So if you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you have responses or reactions, anything at all, please feel free to just comment it in the chat. But I thought as a good start, it would just be helpful for us to get a sense from perhaps my first and then Jessica. What has conscious empathy looked like for you? What does it mean for you?
Sure. Um, okay, conscious empathy. Um, so I thought about this a lot after we had our first meeting, Josh, and I kind of gave it a stab, right, to write a definition of sorts. And I have two. I got too enthusiastic. One of my definitions is deciding to show up and be present with yourself and others at every encounter. And the other version, which is kind of similar, is the ability to be aware. Oh no, no, sorry, that's Ashoka's definition of that. The other one is being generous with your time and attention to yourself and others to gain an understanding of what they mean and where they're coming from. I kind of like the combination of those two words, actually, conscious and empathy, because conscious means, I mean, obviously awareness, and there's an intentionality towards empathy. And if you notice, guys, my definition is sort of like I do feel empathy is an attitude, it's an intuit. And so, to be conscious of that and to be intentional about making sure you have that in the world, I think is important. Um, so it's about stories today, right? And actually, to be honest, I work in a storytelling platform, so I have a few stories when it comes to conscious empathy. Um, the first one is on the work front. I have experienced conscious empathy in a room, and it was quite powerful. In 2018, we had our first community event on refugees in Kuala Lumpur, and so we had people there who wanted to just know about the refugee crisis. People who were curious to find out what they could do to help. And then, and this is what made it the most powerful. We had the refugees themselves there, and there is nothing so life changing or perspective changing as meeting and now calling them your friends, a refugee. There's something like once you know, you cannot unknow. And that room was full of people just connecting on a human level. So we weren't. It wasn't an us and them. We really gave each other full attention, and in giving our attention to each other's stories, we were able to kind of reach out to each other. And I remember there was this elderly couple who were Malaysians, and the first thing once we opened the Q&A, they said, "What can we do?" And that is the power of empathy. I do feel, and I'm super biased, right? But I feel empathy is a superpower, and that having it will change your whole life, because all aspects are better because of that. So that's my work example. My personal example is in 2012. I actually lost my job here in Singapore. I'm from the Philippines, so I went home to kind of just take a break. And within weeks of my going home to take a break, we found out that my nephew Marco was diagnosed with leukemia. Right, so I was there, and the good thing is I had time to be there, and so I was very grateful for that. And his oncologist, Dr. Racho, I felt was the personification of conscious empathy, because what he did was he sat us down and he explained things. So he was giving us information, right? But he was delivering it in such a way that he understood how lost we felt. He understood how scared we were. He knew that we were looking at 5 years of not knowing whether or not we were going to lose Marco. And I so appreciated that. We really felt like he saw us. So I think empathy is when you feel on the receiving end, you feel you've been seen and heard. And I definitely felt that from Dr. Racho. And the good news is Marco is completely cured of leukemia. So wanted to end on a good note. But I do feel those were the times that I saw it in action.
Right, that's honestly so powerful. From your experiences with refugees in KL, seeing how empathy really just unlocks engagement between people who come from just radically different worlds, and then knowing that you've also been on the receiving end of it. I think oftentimes that's often the way it plays out as well, isn't it? The sort of help that we receive is also the sort of help that we learn how to give.
Yeah.
The sort of empathy we experience is also the empathy that we actually get to exercise.
No one loses, right? Whether you're
Yeah, and
giving empathy or you're receiving it, you don't lose.
so I would love to circle back slightly later towards exactly how empathy has gone into your work with refugees. I'm sure there's a lot to get through there, on slightly on more on the practical aspects of it. But before that, Jessica, what about yourself?
Okay. So it's very funny because like before this, of course, I was doing my research. So I asked around with my friends, and we ended up having like this very long discussion about basically like it was all philosophical, like isn't empathy like an innate thing? Why is there such a thing as conscious empathy? Yeah, but before that, but throw that aside, okay. So the okay, I have an example to share. Okay, so, um, basically for me, right, I realized that I basically was lacking in like empathy around my friends until I first joined peer support. Uh, it was like in year one, right? In year one, I had trouble with my friends. So in my poly friends, I mean, yeah, so I had trouble communicating with them, and I couldn't understand why, uh but yeah, because like most of them had already formed cliques, and basically I was having trouble with communication, and because of that I lacked in my team. I lacked in communicating with like my teammates and all that stuff, and my academics also dropped slightly. Then only when it was only then, right, that I realized that in secondary school I actually had friends who approached me to share with me their struggles that were pretty similar to this. And like, which was why I wanted to join peer support. Yeah, because back then I didn't understand that I didn't understand why their struggles were like that. And I always thought it was uh I mean how hard can it be, right? Like, if I'm surviving well, I don't know. I mean, I thought that her academics was okay, in my opinion, but it wasn't lah. Yeah. Yeah. So to me, conscious empathy very similar to mine, actually, almost identical. So, it's basically when you actually are present, when you actually practice being in the moment, and then after you actually listen to them. Yeah. Uh, on the other hand, right, that upon being tasked with this, I started doing reflection and on my daily life, and I started to realize that actually there were many occasions where people around you were being empathetic. Yeah. So on occasions like there was this one occasion when I was in a dance open class. So it was a breaking open class, and like basically I didn't know everyone there. I was just standing in the corner, being an extrovert, I felt like it was pretty okay, just comfortable standing in the middle, while the others were talking. And then suddenly this one girl, she came by and she asked me like, oh, are you feeling lonely, or like, yeah. So then I said, I guess, yeah. Then she said, it's okay, I know how it feels also. And it was at that moment when I realized that, thank goodness for this thing that I started doing my reflection, that yeah, that was a sign of empathy, which I didn't know was actually pretty prominent also. Yeah. So on the other hand, for the person being engaged, right, empathy is like when you feel touched, although I mean you may not know why, but when you feel touched by something that another person has done. Yes. Conscious empathy.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. I really enjoy how you're pulling us to the day to day as well. I mean, not everyone has minds opportunities to engage with refugees in Kuala Lumpur, but I believe most, if not all of us here on this call, we also have these everyday interactions, whether it's in our studies, whether it's in our workplace, um, whether it's just in the relationships that we have with each other, to actually start thinking a little bit more about this conscious aspect of empathy. Um, but back to how it has been a significant part, I'm assuming, of your work. Mai, would you like to provide a little bit more color to that?
Okay. So because we tell stories, right? So just as a backgrounder for people who don't know our better world, so we tell stories in different ways, but the most powerful way we tell stories are through video stories, right? And pre-COVID, we did a lot of that. During COVID, it's kind of harder to do that, but we are kind of working around it. You just have to be creative, I feel. So usually what happens is our content team so our stories are about regular everyday people taking action, doing good, right? And we tell the stories in order to inspire people online to take an action too. So we've embedded it in the way we tell stories, and we kind of work on a day-to-day basis. I'll give you an example. So the people in our stories, we call them our story subjects. And so what happens is when the content team meets with them and produces the story, goes down to film and do the scripting, the editing, all that. We basically uh, need empathy towards our story subject in order to tell an authentic, genuine story of the heart of their work. Because without that, how do you know what motivates someone, right? So really, and unbeknownst to us, that it was empathy at work, really, and it was only years later that we recognized that it was. And then, so let's say after that process, the videos in the cam, right? That's when my team takes over, because my team actually takes care of launching it on social media, right? And then so we get on a call or we meet with our story subject if they're here in Singapore. And we get to know them. We ask them, why do you do this work? What motivates you? And usually there's a story. We talk about story, right, Josh? Usually there's a story behind that too, right? Like, oh, this thing, my mom, okay, as an example, we told the story of Cactus Foundation and the founder. So Cactus Foundation's work their goal is to eradicate child sexual abuse in India, right? Huge goal, right? Because the founder, Nusrat, is a child sexual abuse survivor. So, it's that's why she does it. So the more you kind of know what motivates them, why they do the good that they do, and why they want to help other people, then you understand and you can tell their story. You understand and you can have a conversation on social on their behalf because you know what makes them tick. And empathy, and because we exercise this empathy muscle in all that we do, we end up being friends with our story subjects, right? So like now, like we keep in touch, and if there's anything they need, they call. So it really is also, and we all have relationships, may it be work or school or family or friends. So it really does, it makes your relationships better. So for on the work front, Josh, that's how it kind of really enriches. So usually we have a feedback form, just to square this off. We have a feedback form for the story subjects, and regardless of whether or not we were able to inspire action, because in COVID times, people when we ask for donation, people are kind of hard up and a lot of them won't be able to donate. So sometimes I feel bad, and we'd go back to the story subject and say, we weren't able to raise as much as we had wanted for you, and 100% they came back and said, I just appreciate you guys telling the story, and you kind of championing our work, and they will score us high based on that. And so I'm like, so can you imagine? We didn't like we wanted to raise $1,000 and we were only able to raise 500, let's say, but they were still satisfied. And this is, obviously it doesn't mean we should just sit on that, but and that I think is empathy at work on a process level at OBW. But I think also we have this rule in our team, and our rule is we must give each other the benefit of the doubt. That we are all aiming for the same thing. That I may not agree with how you want to climb this mountain, but I know you and I agree this is the mountain we're gonna climb. And that has helped us be empathetic towards each other.
I might not agree with how you're going to climb this mountain, but that is the mountain we are going to climb. I think that's a great quote, Mai. I'm looking forward to seeing it flashed across the screen on one of your upcoming stories, because it really encapsulates the idea, right, of empathy, recognizing that if we actually do the groundwork, if we actually get our baseline alignments right, if we actually know people, then we can start seeing that there's actually this unified direction. We might be seeing it from different perspectives, coming at it from different angles. But that's really where we want to be headed towards, and that's how we want to see each other as well, coming alongside each other,
Yep.
and having some of that.
Mm.
So with that in mind also, this idea of being people-centric, I'll come back to that later, but this idea of coming alongside each other, Jessica, in peer support, I'm curious, how has that been for you? And in particular, are there aspects that make conscious empathy just difficult? Like, why is it hard? Why do we need to remind ourselves to things through things like peer support networks and programs to actually get about doing it?
Okay, so for that, um, okay, so I recently realized that conscious empathy, even though like our peer support system is like, it's meant to support peers, we are supposed to empathize with one another. And, basically we are supposed to be like role models, right? But I realized that actually, just as humans we always have flaws. So especially now, right, with like the advancement in technology and like what Aaron said just now in the previous panel, he actually said that the speed of things are at a faster rate. Yeah, and because maybe due to like all the advancements and things, and I do agree with that. Like it's because of the increasing workload that we have, and I think that every one of you can agree that like we are all very busy with life, in one way or another, especially, we are in Singapore, right? Yeah. So, um, yeah, why is it so difficult? Yeah, because of the increasing workload. Yes. Uh, One example. Okay, so like in SU, I'll give an example from SU Peer Support. Okay, so in our main committee, we actually have Shafiq here today. Yes, hi. Okay. Um, so actually, we although we are a peer support network, like I said, we are busy with our network with our workload, right? So, uh, especially with peer support being new, it just recently set up like in October last year. We have been like very busy with all sorts of incoming events and things, right? That we actually barely have time to check in with each other. Uh yeah. And I only realized that when our counselors will actually come in to like do monthly updates with us to like, ask us like how are our progress, and of course check in with us, right? Then it was only then that I realized, she asked, when was the last time that you guys actually checked in with each other? And, you know, uh, yeah, so I realized that the last time we checked in with each other, with every one of the peer support main committee, was actually the last meetup with the counselor. Yeah, so I think that conscious empathy is difficult because uh, although we always say it's the workload, I think it's also because uh, we do not take our time to like see the people around us sometimes. Yeah. I think it's very important that like maybe during break time, or like even just 5 minutes of the day, you can just like ask them how's life, or like good morning, and like who knows what will come out of it. Yeah. Yes.
So what I'm hearing from you, Jessica, simple everyday gestures, and quite importantly also caring for caregivers. Figuring out how we can do that well also in teams, in our day-to-day interactions, simple check-ins. Something that my organization we try our best to do from time to time is it's just these check-ins before we get to work proper, before we ramp up the efficiency. Just spending some time getting to know how different people are feeling. There are all sorts of different ways to do that, and I strongly encourage everyone on this call to explore that a little also. I'm also curious, right? How people in this call, people listening to this panel, what was it that, or what is it about empathy that you find difficult, challenging? What makes conscious empathy hard? So I'm throwing this question out. Feel free to respond in the chat. And as we think about that a little, but perhaps I could also just pull a little from Mai's idea about meeting people and getting to meet them where they are at, and sharing a little bit of how it has felt for me. So
Okay.
at Impart, we, as I mentioned, we work quite a fair bit with youths from really complex backgrounds. There's this one youth in particular in just the past 3 months that we've been spending quite a lot more time with. He comes from a family where he has experienced all sorts of different neglect. He comes from a family where his sister has been dealing some substances, and he has also been consuming some of these substances. And from the onset, when you first meet this young man, you will see that he is shut off. He's cold. He's aloof. He doesn't talk about his emotions at all. If you ask him, "Hey, what are you thinking of doing?" he'll say, "I don't know." If you ask him, "How have you felt about this activity that we just had?" he'll say, "I don't know." And that's sort of the norm, you know. But we spent some time just getting to know him, working with him, and we saw progress, amazing progress. Over time, we realized that he actually had a real talent for playing the guitar. He wasn't that strong with his academics. He wasn't that good with figuring out mathematics and numbers and all those weird English grammar rules. Right? He wasn't really good at that, but he was really good at the guitar. And he, over time, also the more we got to know him, the more we knew that part of this not really expressing himself is just built from his lifetime's worth of experience being told that he has to be strong, being told that to be the man of the house, cause the father isn't present. To do that, he has to be strong, he has
Yeah.
to be firm, he can't show weakness. And all of that just helped us to realize that there's so much to go in his progress.
Mm.
We were super encouraged in just seeing him grow, and then he relapsed.
Uh,
And the process of relapse was really challenging for us because as I mentioned, I didn't mention this, we're all driven by volunteers. So we have volunteers meeting these youths with supervision and with support from our organization. But we have volunteers doing that, and there were sessions throughout his relapse where he wouldn't show up. We would have volunteers traveling down 30 minutes, 40 minutes, waiting an hour only to realize that he isn't there. We would have volunteers trying to check in and conducting sessions with him only to realize that he is unresponsive the entire session because he's on a emotional down from
mm,
substance usage. And throughout that process, I was talking to our mental wellness expert in our organization, and I was saying, I really think that we might be coddling him a little. Um, and when I said that, sparks started erupting a little. There was a little bit of conflict. And part of this, I realized in hindsight, when I started thinking that we were coddling him and that we needed to pull back support.
mm,
Because volunteers going down, right? Like, do I still continue telling them to go down? Do I still continue telling them to meet this youth where he's at? But part of this entire experience, I recognize in hindsight, is really the fact that I don't understand what it's like to have relapsed.
mm,
I don't understand what it is like to have substances sort of alter some of your processes and the way that you
mm,
respond to things.
mm,
I am so used in my nice, comfortable Singaporean middle class, streamlined pathways to think of progress as a linear thing. And tying this back to this entire idea of empathy, right? Recognizing that so much of empathy begins by acknowledging that you might not know what is best,
oh yeah, absolutely.
acknowledging that
Mm.
your modes of progress might not be
Yeah,
entirely accurate either,
yeah,
and working through that, seeing it
yeah,
as very much as Mai said, right? It is an attitude, it is a posture, it is a process. Empathy is very much a process that begins with us consciously reminding ourselves that our norms and our ways might not exactly be the best ways.
yeah.
Yes.
Totally agree. Yeah. I think
Yes.
also because we're all conditioned differently and we're conditioned by our life experience. So if you don't have that life experience, actually that's where empathy comes in, right? Because we won't have the bandwidth to experience everyone's life experience. I felt the same way also. I felt my shortcomings on that front with refugees because I would never be able to fully understand how it feels not to have any rights. In the same way, I guess Josh, you how would you know how it feels to have a relapse? You know, but yeah, but I think empathy is the bridge. See, or else we won't get to connection, and you know, and connection is everything. Because then you're telling someone, I see you and I hear you, and we all need the same thing, right? So
We really do. We really do. Um, I'm seeing quite a lot of activity in the chat box as well. I see a question from Shana. So my Jessica, not sure if you all have input on that question, but I also see that Cal has very helpfully chimed in. I'm not sure if Cal wants to elaborate on that small comment. If you're comfortable, if you're not, that's fine.
Hi, Kel. Ah, okay.
So Cal was pointing us,
okay, is that the
yeah, Cal was
empathy
pointing us
versus
to the,
sympathy? Is that the one?
yep,
Yeah, I think that's
yeah, that's
from
the one.
Brene Brown. So I wasn't in the session, but I'm just gonna give it a stab. Shanna, you tell me if I'm off, okay? That sympathy is um, I feel bad for you. Empathy is I feel with you. Is how Brene Brown distinguishes sympathy from empathy. So sympathy it drives disconnection, and empathy fuels connection. So they're actually quite, that's what I remember.
Yeah. I'd like to add on. So, like, sympathy, right? Basically, whatever that you might end up saying or reacting to the person, it might not be like, it might be helpful in a sense where like uh the person might feel hurt, but it might not be in such a way that it's able to help get the person out of the situation. Yeah.
So, sorry, Jessica. So you were saying that for sympathy, um, you sort of acknowledge what's there, but you're not really helping necessarily. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah, like the difference, even though like sympathy and empathy, they might sound similar, they have like a very big difference. And uh like yeah, I think because of the like not being able to resonate or not being able to understand uh that perspective, due to, you know, sympathizing instead, one might not be able to uh give an appropriate response that is actually helpful for the person. Like uh like yeah, it's more of a I feel bad for you, rather than like I'm trying to understand you. Yeah.
So feeling for someone rather than entering their space.
Mm.
And I think Kel also helpfully provided a little bit more elaboration for those who might have missed it. She was pointing to how empathy tends to be more selfless, or sympathy can exacerbate some in-group out-group dynamics, power dynamics, as Cal has put it. And I think so much of this is just this idea of entering into someone else's space, right? Instead of just thinking about giving back in general, but thinking about actually being a part, entering a space, really seems as though that's the starting point for empathy. And circling back to Shana's original question about the difference between normal empathy and conscious empathy, I think that's also pointing us in that direction when we recognize that it's a process. And as much as Aaron pointed us to like certain feelings, warm tingly feelings, as he put it, that you might experience in the process of empathy, I think when you start seeing it as a process, as a posture, as an attitude that you're adopting, then you stop being so reliant on just feeling good in that process, and recognizing that so much of it is just about. So the conscious part about it is recognizing that you are meeting people. You're not just producing an idea. You're not just telling narratives, but you're actually meeting people, real people. You're seeing them. You're looking at them. You're engaging with them, and you're meeting them where they're at. Jessica, Mai, any other thoughts on normal versus conscious empathy,
Sure.
especially in your line?
Oh, okay, sure. So I think if it's not empathy that doesn't have the conscious it with tied to it, it happens when it happens. Like you're not actually taking full advantage of it as opposed to conscious empathy. Because then if you're conscious, meaning you're intentional, you're giving it your attention and your effort, you will find opportunities to do it, to practice it. And if I may just give an example, like in our team, we used to work in a co-working space and we had a team room. It was such a small room. So we were really literally in each other's faces. Okay. And then what happened was one of our colleagues came in and he announced that after, I guess, years of, he and his wife are finally expecting a baby. And we were all like, yay, we were like celebrating with him. La, la. And then from the corner, I noticed another colleague, he swiveled his chair um, not towards the circle, but away. And I saw that and I was like, oh, okay, I know why, right? And so I just let that moment pass. And then when I was going home that day on the bus, I messaged him and I said, I know that must have been hard for you because I know you and your wife have been trying also to have a baby. And you don't, I mean, I think if I wasn't giving effort or, kind of changing my habits and my behavior to find opportunities to give empathy to people, I wouldn't have noticed that, I think. And I'm far from being a master of it. But and then he said, thank you for your message, you know. And I think he just, it was such a knee-jerk reaction for him. He couldn't hide it, I feel, but I felt he tried to hide it. And I just had wanted him to know that it, I just acknowledge that it must have been a hard moment for him. Um, and yeah, and so like our relationship in the team is better because of moments like that, I guess. Yeah, so I just, when you were talking, Josh and Jessica, I thought of that. And yeah.
Yeah, if I were to try to crystallize it a little, part of this consciousness is as much as you want to be present in the moment with whomever you might be engaging in and with, recognizing that there are other responses and other perspectives to, well, what is truly good news, right? Your
Yeah,
friend.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely
but
great news, right? Yeah.
and all of that only really happens when you sort of count the cost and commit yourself to knowing people. Like if you didn't know your coworker the way that you did, you wouldn't have picked that up either.
Yeah, so it's a bit like an antenna. I don't know how to describe it, right? You kind of just, you want to be available to people. And that doesn't come easy. I'll give you an example. Like my phone is not near me at all right now because I said I'm gonna give 100% of my attention to the room, right? And and so I try. I don't always succeed. In fact, I fail a lot. I'm like, here I am with my phone, you know. But I'm like, oh, I just want the effort to matter, and I hope I get better. And I think we all can do that, right? Like when you meet up with friends, I never put my phone on the table. Just little kind of tweaks to kind of encourage the empathy in your life.
So practical handles things like check-ins with your team, things like everyday conversations, things like not really touching your phones, and broader level thinking. Being committed to meeting people where they are at, being clear about finding that mountain that you're all climbing together. Very, very helpful in this entire exercise. Jessica, Maya, I'm going to ask you all for any other practical handles that you would like to just throw out from your experiences. But before I do that, I'm also curious, the Ashoka people on this call, I'm not sure if we have run over time. Wondering if you have any input on that note.
Yeah, we're just supposed to wrap up now. If you want to take a few extra minutes just to close off, that's not an issue. But we should be wrapping up. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so in closing, Jessica, Maya, any thoughts, ideas, practical handles you want to leave with our very, very kind audience?
Sure. I want to thank everyone for coming. I wrote this. Okay, I woke up in the middle of the night and wrote this. So I said, oh, maybe it's for the session. Maybe I think it's more a note to self, but maybe something you can get maybe it will resonate with you. Own the presence you bring. Be intentional, make it purposeful. Give the gift of your attention because attention is love. I think is so. I thought since I woke up and wrote it down, I'll share it.
Wow, okay. Your midnight thoughts, my that's that's deep.
I was
Jessica,
nervous.
Yeah.
I was nervous.
were you up at So Jessica, what were you thinking of at 12 a.m. last night?
I was thinking about my exam for today. I couldn't sleep well. Yeah. Yeah, but I like it. Own the presence you bring and give the attention. Yes. I think for me, if like there are a lot of you who are like beginning to explore the journey of empathy, like what I really learned from this experience was that I started writing like everyday journals about incidents, and like honestly, even like tiny things, right? Like what you said or like what somebody has said to you. Wow, you can discover so much. Yes.
Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Mai. On journaling, I believe that might be the next activity. And just in closing, thank you so much for bringing together these ideas. I think for all of us here, just recognizing that the conscious part of empathy means that it comes at a cost. If it were just your everyday quotidian background noise, then it springs up whenever it's convenient. But conscious empathy, I think, is very much acknowledging that, hey, these things come at a cost. Meeting people where they're at, it comes at a cost. But it really is a cost much more worth it. Getting to see that there are so many more worlds than our own. I hope it's been helpful for you. Jessica, I'm sure there are ways to connect with you wherever through your organizational pages. I'm not sure if you want to just drop your handles or anything of that sort in the chat box. As for me, I'm Joshua with Impart. You can find us on these platforms. It's been really, really nice sharing this time with all of you.